Welcome, everyone. Hi, it's Jenny Whitener. Thrilled to welcome you all today to a very special webinar program delivered by Charles Thomason, Get Unstuck, How to Unlock and Activate the Wisdom of Others. It's exciting to have Charles with us today from GXG, Chief Client Officer there, and he'll be sharing with us some exciting tips on how to unlock the wisdom of others. Many of you know Bridge Innovate, so welcome. It's our pleasure to host the Inspire series, inviting great leaders from around our country to share inspirational stories of change and innovation. And as you know, Bridge Innovate is a global network of business strategists and consultants who work alongside you to create defining moments of organizational change and growth. So we're thrilled to be with you today and to be the host of this Inspire series. So today, going on, we're excited to introduce you to Charles Thomason, Chief Client Officer for GXG. Charles and I have known each other for quite some time. Being a Georgia Tech alumni and having a background with IBM Consulting is now a key part of this venture of GXG and mobilizing great capability to help organizations unlock their full potential. So Charles, welcome and thank you for joining us today. You want to share a bit more about yourself and your background and then share your perspective with us today?
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. Obviously, I love Bridge Innovate, the organization, and really excited and honored to be a part of the Inspire series. I know there's a lot of other great speakers that have gone kind of before me and that are up to come that you'll hear more about later as well. Thanks for the introduction, Jenny. Yeah, I mean, as she mentioned, Georgia Tech graduate, went on to IBM. There's a funny acronym when you're within IBM, people refer to it as I've been moved. Mine was not physically, but more across different parts of the organization, all the way from M&A to strategy with a few stops in project management and digital active experience in media and software development along the way. And then came to GXG in 2016, just running a number of our accounts here, and then was lucky enough when our now CEO bought the company to be able to take over as Chief Client Officer. So been focused on execution of our business model, which you guys will get to hear the crux of today. And then managing those client relationships and focusing on the scalability of the business model as we continue to grow. So thank you for the intro, Jenny. And with that, I'll just kind of jump in here if that's okay. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about getting unstuck today. It's a term that we use at GXG really just to depict helping our clients move through some of the most difficult times, which obviously we're kind of in one today, right? We just used some McKinsey data when we're having some of these conversations. I actually saw, Jenny, that you guys and Bridge Innovated share similar McKinsey data a few weeks ago around the opportunity that people believe exists as a part of the pandemic and the new normal that we're in today, but how ill-equipped they feel to maybe address and target some of those opportunities. So hopefully we can talk today about leveraging the power of wisdom, which we talk about here at GXG, to be able to take advantage of some of those. So we'll start with a little exercise. We love to do this exercise here with GXG with our clients. So I'm going to pass it on to you guys. Two simple questions here. The first one, what is your go-to piece of business advice? So if you just grab a piece of paper and a pen, jot this down. We'll be able to come back. We'll circle back to it later in the presentation. So what's your go-to piece of business advice? And where did you learn it, or who did you learn it from? So I'll give everybody a couple of minutes here to write that down. But we find, especially in working with senior leaders, that everybody's got one or a few of these that they leverage, they lean on, whether daily or weekly, that really drives a lot of their decision making and their behaviors within their organizations. Great, so with that, I'll move on. We touched a little bit about this, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. My perspective is a bit of a unique mix. We're doing a version of consulting and coaching today here at GXG. But I also kind of have my background, as we touched about before, kind of this unique experience having been a traditional consultant and now trying to maybe bring some different thoughts with this wisdom-based methodology to the industry. And this is an equation you'll see a lot today. W equals K times E. For us means wisdom equals knowledge times experience. And for us, it really has to be both. So you'll see that there are a lot of different challenges that we've helped our clients get unstuck. We think wisdom can help you get unstuck with any type of challenges that you're facing, whether it's as an organization or as an individual. And we'll talk about how you can leverage some of those things to help you personally today. So let's talk a little bit about wisdom. Again, that is the guts of the GXG business model. And so let's just go through a few questions that we're going to go over. So the first one, what is wisdom? Why is wisdom so important? How do I get more wisdom? And what happens when wisdom goes up? So let's start running through those. First question, what is wisdom? So for some of you people, for some of you guys and gals who have been around Atlanta and in the Southeast for a while, this may look like a familiar picture to you. Spaghetti Junction, circa 1987. And so this is an interesting image for us because we believe that wisdom is the intersection of knowledge and experience. Again, and it has to be both. We know when working with people, particularly as you're trying to get through some tough problems, that sometimes there's knowledge you can lean on, other people have experience, and then that unique group of people that has wisdom, that have both that been there, done that, and that thought leadership or that subject matter expertise on a topic. And those are the type of people that we want to leverage when we're looking for that wisdom. So what's the question we'd like to answer? Why is wisdom so important? At GXG, we talk about expectation versus reality. And there's a unique thing about this line on the graph here. It's perfectly linear, right? So whether you're a Fortune 500 organization, in this case, this is probably an expectation line for your earnings. If you're a P&L owner, it's probably an expectation line for your business or your LOB. Or if you're just an individual contributor who's looking to show progress on the projects that they're working on, I'm sure an up and to the right line is something that people want you to show, and that's the expectation as well. But that's not really the reality, right? Often the line looks like this. Often we're growing and then we stall, and there might be peaks and valleys. And something that we found that was really interesting, almost directly correlated to these peaks and valleys that we talk about, is the Fortune 500 profits over the last 25 years. And I'm sure if this graph went a little bit further, you'd see another big valley, and it might be the one that we're kind of going through relative to the pandemic that we're in today. And so the important thing for us at GXG, what's happening here, right? And those things, there's these valleys, these opportunities where you might just be stuck. And we believe sometimes that's the best application for wisdom. That's the best application as you and your business try to go do some new stuff. Typically, in those valleys, you notice some gaps, right? So mind the gap is a statement we use here at GXG. And so those wisdom gaps within your organization might tie directly to what you're trying to do as you try to do, technical term, right? New stuff, right? There's a big gap between the core of the business model today and what you're trying to go do that's different, because oftentimes to get out of these stuck areas, we got to go try some new things, right? We got to go beyond our core business model out to some adjacencies. And sometimes that's where our internal organization doesn't have that knowledge and experience, right? That wisdom on a topic. So next, let's talk a little bit about how you can tell if you or your organization is stuck. So our CEO loves to call this the circle of stuck. As we go through these, I'll talk a little bit about them, but I do want to open it up to the group to maybe provide some examples, but let me just go through these a little bit. Oftentimes when we're stuck as organizations, right, we have a meeting, we typically have another meeting and then another meeting and another meeting, right? And it's just a series of these, and oftentimes those groups of people that are involved in those meetings continues to grow. And then we send a recap email, right? There's always the joke that some meetings can be done with a recap email, but we see that a lot. And then with that email, we call it carbon copy chaos, right? Does that group that's CC'd on the email continue to grow? Our CEO was actually having a conversation with one of our clients recently, and he set the record as far as we know it. He said there was 347 people copied on an email that was sent to him and a number of other people. That's probably a pretty good symptom of being stuck, right? The next one is buzzword salad, right? I mean, we hear that a lot, right? If your notes from the conversation and people signing up for things continue to be filled with buzzwords, that's probably a pretty good cover for activity and not as much progress. Endless ideation, right? We're in that endless kind of conversation as far as meetings, and the list of ideas continues to grow. We're not making a decision on one. A mountain of priorities, right? Has anyone's imperative list gotten to something like 20 or 30 or 50? That's a little bit directly against the whole concept of an imperative, right? And then we say it's time to go outside, right? When we hire people from the outside, oftentimes what we found and what we're trying to fill, obviously, here at GXG is that those individuals that we're hiring do not have both knowledge and experience, right? Maybe a little bit of one or the other. But I'd love, before I jump into some of our client examples, if you could just go off mute, I'd love to hear from you. Does anybody have examples of experiencing any of these symptoms or some other symptoms they think might be symptoms of being stuck? And this is the problem when you do a lot of these. I'll just sit here, right? I mean, I'll wait for an example. So.
Charles, one of the things that comes to my mind is when people appoint a task force, right? So you'll have a group of people who might be initially accountable for solving a problem that doesn't seem to go anywhere. So then they appoint a task force and they go off and study it for a while. Then they come back to the main group. That doesn't work. And then eventually they still get back around to time to go outside. So that's one other thing that shows me when an organization's stuck.
Right. Yeah, no, we might have to take that symptom and add it to the circle here. That's definitely one. A lot of task force being formed lately too.
You can see a comment in the chat about endless meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do just continue to go on and on. That's certainly a symptom. Well, cool. Well, what I'll do then, I'll dive into some of our client examples. You'll see, again, some of the examples we'll go through are both helping companies get unstuck, and then one of them will be a little bit about helping at an individual level, because you can certainly use both of these. So let's jump right in. One of GXG's clients was a $4 billion CPG public company. The new stuff they were trying to do was right the ship on an underperforming acquisition. It had been modeled with an industry standard CAGR. After 4 years, it was at 4%, right? So I think actually when they made the acquisition, it was at 20%, and then it dropped to 12, which was industry standard target, and then it was all the way at 4. So they had a ton of key questions, right? And the questions are how do we get up to speed on this new market, right? They were entering the vitamins, minerals, and supplements market they hadn't been in before. What are our metrics for success? Where do we invest, right? What's going to give us the best ROI? And what's the best channel distribution strategy for the business? So as they're looking to right the ship, what were they stuck on? Well, they didn't have any institutional knowledge within that industry, and they were stuck with an underperforming asset that they had acquired about 4 years ago. So that's one example. The second one, we worked with an $8 billion midstream natural gas company. As a whole, the natural gas and midstream oil and gas business is lagging behind as far as digital is concerned in general. But they really wanted to move a lot from manual to digital. One of the things they needed to do was get better at leveraging their data. And then what they did recognize, and in that space, operational efficiency of assets was going to be the key to winning in that space long term. So a lot of the questions they had: how do you become an industry leader? What's a digital roadmap for transformation look like? What are important areas to evolve as a business for 3 to 5? And then organization, the structure and the communication of transforming in regards to digital was super important to them. So they were stuck in kind of a manual old industry, and how do you bring it into the digital age, if you will. And then the last one, this is the individual that I was talking about, took on a new role, had been focused a lot within the mobile space within this financial services company, and was going into digital lab. Was going to be responsible for the long-term growth strategy for the organization. And not only that, he was going to have a bunch of new team members, probably skewing younger, probably skewing closer to software development type of people. So managing a different type of group. And then what do we invest in, right? He had a new budget, and he needed to focus on having that lab, that innovation channel, deliver value today while also looking long term. And so he had a lot of questions about how to be successful in that new role. So he was stuck because he was in a new role that he hadn't been in before. So that's a little bit about some real life examples of being stuck. So our next question, how do I get more wisdom? So now we talked about why people get stuck and some examples of them. Let's share a little bit about how we can get unstuck. So again, just a quick reminder, no math involved here, just a little bit of an equation showing our process, if you will. But the equation is the punchline, right? It really is. We think this is the fastest and most effective way to get unstuck by leveraging the wisdoms of others. And again, reminder, it's got to be both knowledge and experience. So we're going to go through a couple of stages here. The good news about this is anyone can do it. We're going to walk through how we go through these steps today. Again, this is a toolkit, a methodology, a process, and it's really what I want everyone to leave with. Is again, in these, as leaders in these difficult times, how do we leverage this wisdom to help organizations get unstuck? So the steps here will be get humble, draw the destination, find the missing wisdom, and then how do we activate those learnings? So first and foremost here, the step one, get humble. Obviously, here's a very formal definition of humility, right? The willingness to see oneself accurately. I'm going to jump ahead here to what our definition of humility here at GXG is. And can you recognize and would you acknowledge that you are stuck, right? And lots of conversations with prospects and then clients at GXG, you're really on either side of the road, right? You really have the humility to say, yes, there are some people out there that know probably a little bit more than I do on this topic. And they can probably help us move further and faster. And it's probably a good time, again, to just reiterate the GXG version of stuck, which doesn't mean you're not moving at all. Doesn't mean you're not making progress. It just might mean that line as far as expectation versus reality is plateauing a little bit, right? You might feel like you're dragging a foot in the mud. That's step one, right? You got to be humble. You got to be willing to learn from others and leverage that wisdom. Step two, draw the destination. We at GXG, again, you'll hear some very simple terms here from us. So if A is where you are today, what is B, right? Really define where you are today and where you want to be, what that successful destination looks like. Once you do that, you can identify your wisdom gaps, right? You can say, here's who I am, here's what I want, where I want to be. Here are probably the few areas of knowledge and wisdom that we don't have within the organization. And then what we do at GXG, we love to map it. We map these in an ecosystem, and on the next slide, we can dive into that a little bit more. Right, and here's an example of an ecosystem we would leverage at GXG. And this actually is from the example of the individual that was running digital labs at that financial services company. Right, he had those things he was responsible for in his new role. A lot of those around strategy for growth and new technologies, disrupting their industry, and then really managing those new talents and those new groups. And so what we do is we say, okay, now that those are broken down into those component parts, now we know exactly where those wisdom gaps are, and we know what to go look for moving forward. So that's the next one, right? Now that we know what the wisdom gaps are, and now that we've drawn the destination, which helped us define those, then we go into step three, which is finding the wisdom. What does the swimming pool have to do with this, right? For us, we just believe everyone has their own swim lanes as far as knowledge and experience, as far as wisdom is concerned, right? The two most important things to me for this is that everyone has a swim lane, right? And that the ability to have more than one swim lane does exist, but everyone has at least one. And it doesn't matter where within the organization. Obviously, as young professionals at GXG, a lot of us focus on the fact that there is a lot to learn from everyone, right? So we always encourage our clients to look across the spectrum, get rid of roles, get rid of titles, although those can be helpful indicators. The focus really is that that person has both the knowledge and experience on that very specific topic you're trying to educate yourselves on. You could be surprised where that might actually come from. And a lot of the key characteristics of those people, right, where you can find some of that wisdom: operators, they have thought leaderships, right, vision of the future, they're curious, and they have a high willingness to help. So a little bit about finding the wisdom. And so what I want to do now is, again, back to those few case studies with our clients to share those. Again, in this next stage, here are some of the people that we found that had that wisdom that actually helped our clients get unstuck from those issues, right? So again, back to this CPG company, right? What were they stuck on? Underperforming acquisition in the vitamins, minerals, and supplement space. So we found someone that was really cutting edge in nutrigenomics, which is something that was going to be impactful to that space, and help them develop their strategy around that topic. Found someone who was a vitamin CEO, right? Someone who had led successfully a vitamin organization in the past. A chief commercial officer of a CPG company that really was successful and growing pretty quickly, and then someone in the prebiotic space, a little bit of best of both worlds. They're both commercialization and a topic of the future for VMS. The midstream natural oil and gas company, again, we talked a lot about people, so an EVP of HR. We talked a lot about digital. You see a digital strategist and an investor there. Another chief digital and information officer at a similar company. CEO of data analytics, again, data was an important topic for them. And then leader of a corporate innovation hub, right? How can we focus on innovation? So you'll see throughout those groups of people, lots of wisdom on the areas that our client was just lagging in. And then individually, again, for that digital labs leader at the financial services company, a chief strategist for fintech and innovation lab, an innovation executive of Fortune 100 organization, automation, and then a consumer strategist. You'll see there, not only are we connecting them with peers because those people have been leading those organizations, right? They're just a little further down the path than our clients, but we're also connecting them with people that know about the technologies and some of the topics that they might be investing in. So it's an operational perspective on those things that were important to them. So here's one of the important parts, right? How do you go find some of your own operators? This is something that's near and dear to my heart. Myself and my team do this almost all day, every day. So look at prior research and conference agendas, right? That's a great place to find someone that's speaking on this topic that you're looking for, where you have some of those wisdom gaps. Do web searches with the keywords from your ecosystem, right? Remember that taxonomy that we built and all those different little bubbles that we had there. All of those are great keywords to go search for those people with wisdom. Always reach out with something specific and relevant. That's always going to increase the likelihood of them responding to you. And then practice reciprocity. Something we really believe in here at GXG is that if you're willing to have that curious mind and you have that willingness to help, it'll certainly come back around. And we run into that way more than you might think. There is still a strong spirit of reciprocity out there. So that's finding the wisdom. Step 4, activate the learnings. It's funny, the slide has been in a deck we've used for a little while, and it still holds very true, except for even more today, because we can't do this, right? we're not doing networking events. We're not going and listening to conferences in big crowds. We don't have that opportunity to target people in some of those networking events before, after, and in between. And even when we do, right, if you have a very specific topic you're trying to grow your wisdom base on, it's going to be really hard to do within those groups, right? Our CEO always loves to talk about he's an introvert. And so if he was in one of these environments, he's just going to go back to the hotel and call his family, right? I'd probably do the same with a newborn. It's time to FaceTime the baby. And so you're not going to be able to leverage that networking event to really learn more about those individuals. And plus, I don't know if you guys can, but I can't pick out the automation expert in that crowd just from this picture. So it might be really hard to know who to go talk to. So this is just a better approach that we would suggest, right? Or at least it's something that we believe is, right? And we call these operator conversations, right? At GXG, if we were to do them in one-on-one, we call them connections and small groups, sometimes advisory boards or group insights. But the important things about these are it's very targeted output, right? So this is what I want to get from the conversation. It's very narrow, and you're going to deep dive on one of those topics. Again, think about those bubbles and how specific they were in that ecosystem. Again, it's one-on-one or a small group, and you do in-depth pre-research. What we do at GXG, we always vet and talk to every wisdom expert that we would connect with our client. We always send prep emails. We're always there to facilitate. So it's very direct and it's very focused. And I would encourage everyone, when you're reaching out to try to extract that wisdom, that you follow a lot of these same things too. So we just talked a little bit about this, but how do you make the most out of your operator conversations? Prep a lot ahead time. The video works, in person's better. Not today, right? So focus on video if you can. Synthesize the learnings, right? I mean, it goes back to that list of imperatives we talked about before. Really hard to go focus on an actionable 20 things, right? It's going to be really hard to do. So synthesize that down to things that you can go do and do pretty quickly. Right, so that's a little bit about kind of, how we find that wisdom. We get humble, right? We draw the destination, we find that B, we find the missing wisdom, and then we activate the learnings. And what happens when wisdom goes up? We think flawless execution as an individual and as companies. People make choices, people take on risk, people move faster, and speed of results is obviously important. So I'll run through the impact we had on some clients, and then we'll keep going along here. So again, that CPG company with an underperforming acquisition. So after a 12-month advisory board with us, and those 5 people just constantly extracting that wisdom, that $25 million margin improvement, $100 million in new sales, 2 new product launches, and they hired some channel specific talent once we narrowed down what those were. And their CEO said, let's declare victory, right? $8 billion midstream natural gas company. Again, what happened to them? Well, $100 million in impact from transition to a fee-based business, right? Also allowed them a ton of variability, which was great. Increased their operational efficiencies, increased remote plant operations, and then rolled out a CX platform, which made a massive impact to their bottom line and to their CSAT. our chief transformation officer was our client. He said these conversations have reintroduced fun to our team. They're excited and energized to take action. And then finally, the individual running the digital labs of financial services company, he was an early advocate for consumer data sovereignty, which is something they ended up investing in. He was invested in a strategy to double down on emerging tech. We talked about automation, but a number of different things where they made small acquisitions in, which will be a big part of their long-term growth. And then he was able to learn from those other lab and innovation hub operators that he needed to immediately start delivering value to the business or else it'd be seen as a cost center. So we really focused on immediate value. And good for GXG, right? He tried it for 6 months and he loved it so much he decided to continue to do it for a year. So this is a case study. So last thing here, hopefully you guys remember that question we had, what was your go-to piece of business advice and who did you learn it from or where did you learn it? I'll start with an example and then I'll open it up to the group. Mine is the 24-hour rule. We use this quite often here at GXG when you're managing a lot of relationships and things seem sometimes like they're on fire. We always say, put yourselves in that person's shoes and you can address it 24 hours later, right? And typically I come back with a much more level-headed approach and typically manage that situation much better than I would have immediately. And here's the important part, right? Who did I learn it from? I learned it from our CEO. I learned it from someone that was just wiser than me on a topic. And hopefully we see a little bit of that in some of y'all's as well. So I'd love to open it up to the group quickly and see what your go-to piece of advice is and who you might have learned it from.
So Charles, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that I had a senior partner of Ernst & Young tell me one time that I was going to win the battle but lose the war. So I was driving hard on a specific component of an overall big strategy initiative, and I was getting quite a bit of resistance. And he said, if you press this so hard, you might win this one, but then you won't have any followers for the rest of the strategy. So you have to be thoughtful of not only winning the battle, but also winning the overall war or whatever along the way and balancing those two things.
Right. Yeah, that's a perfect example, right? You learn that from someone who had just been doing that for a little while, right? A little wiser than you on managing some of those.
Absolutely, much wiser. So I see one coming in from the chat. It says, mine is a book title, Start With Why, Simon Sinek. That came in from Mary.
Simon Sinek, probably a fairly wise individual as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Others.
Great. Well, I know we've only got 1 minute left. I talked for quite a while, but I'd love to just kind of move on to this last slide. If you have an interest in learning any more about this, we'd be happy to help. Again, practice that reciprocity a little bit. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, reach out to my email, or check us out at GXG. Also interesting, our CEO wrote a book on the topic, so a lot more about getting unstuck and leveraging the power of wisdom, which will be coming out this fall. But let me see if there's any questions or comments from the group before I turn it back over to Jenny.
One of the questions that came to my mind is you talked a little bit about these case studies, a 12-month kind of or year-long engagement. You even gave the example of a 6-month and then moving to a year-long. Give me some perspective of how much time it takes to engage in this so they actually unlock the wisdom. Is there, a perspective there on the time it takes to invest in this?
No, I mean, not really, actually. Sometimes we talked about the 12-month engagements. That really is creating an entire pathway, and there's a ton of progress over that period of time as far as changing and writing pretty large ships, right? I mean, those are big organizations. That takes some time to move them along. But one of my favorite quotes from a person that was in one of our one programs is, gosh, I had no idea I could learn that much in an hour, right? So at GXG, we typically take on all that load of doing the work before and facilitating it afterwards. And I say, wow, that I really feel like that's the way I should be learning a lot of these topics on things I should be stuck on. So it can be an hour and you can learn a lot. Or if you need to move or turn around the Titanic in some of these big organizations, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to extract that wisdom, but obviously doing some of those things just takes some time.
Great. Well, I know that we're at the hour. I want to be respectful of people's time. Thank you so much. An amazing, very innovative approach. And just if you could go back for one moment, just want to really call out Charles's email, cthomason@gxg.co. So please do reach out to Charles if you have additional questions or would like to experiment and launch this new Get Unstuck approach. We have more Inspire series programs coming up, one kind of fueled by our Bright Spark youth initiative. High schoolers participated in Bright Sparks Invention Challenge and is now a successful entrepreneur as he goes into college. So Ash Perry will be telling that story on August the 12th. And then also the Prosperity Playbook coming up on August the 19th by Mackie McNeil. So lots of new things ahead. Check us out at www.bridgeinnovate.com under events, our Inspire series, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you, Charles. Great session today. See you soon, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.